Harlan was no stranger to early mornings. Living in the quiet mountain village of Stone's Edge, he had a simple life, his days shaped by sunrises, the whisper of pine trees, and the rhythmic dance of hard work. At dawn, he would venture up the narrow paths to tend the sheep, feeling like the last man on earth, wrapped in the wild beauty of the mountain. But this morning, something was different. Just as the first golden slivers of sunlight brushed the mountain tops, Harlan saw her. A woman, radiant, otherworldly, was kneeling in a meadow up ahead, her hands busy with something in the earth. At first, he thought she was one of the townsfolk, although no woman he'd ever met moved with that fluid grace or wore such delicate, silken clothing. Her dress was a shade of silver so soft it nearly shimmered, and her hair, platinum, almost like molten starlight, fell in waves around her face. And her eyes, a cool, clear blue, seemed to hold all the secrets of the sky. Spellbound, Harlan froze, not daring to move or make a sound, worried that this ethereal vision might vanish if he did. Harlan stood rooted to the spot, hidden behind a boulder, watching the woman as she moved through the meadow. She was sowing something into the ground, delicate seeds from a small pouch at her side. But it wasn't ordinary seed. As her fingers brushed the earth, the soil seemed to shimmer faintly, almost as though the seeds themselves were glowing. The woman's movements were careful, reverent, as if she were planting something precious. She whispered words he couldn't quite hear, words that seemed to dance on the edges of his understanding. He wanted to move closer, but fear held him back. Then, as though sensing his gaze, she looked up, and their eyes met. Harlan felt a jolt, as though lightning had struck the mountain. Her expression softened, her lips curving in a small, knowing smile. She raised a hand, beckoning him forward, and without thinking, he obeyed, his boots crunching softly on the dry earth as he approached her. As he drew closer, Harlan felt a strange pull in his chest, a feeling both foreign and familiar. Something about her felt like a dream, a distant memory he couldn't place, yet he was drawn to her with a pull he couldn't deny. Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Her eyes sparkled with something close to mischief as she answered. "A traveler, just passing through." She tilted her head, studying him with an intensity that made him feel as though she could see straight into his soul. He glanced down at the seeds she was planting. They don't look like any seeds I've ever seen." The woman only smiled, a mysterious smile that left Harlan with more questions than answers. The woman's smile faded into a look of curiosity, and she held out one of the seeds on the tip of her finger. It looked like a tiny, luminous pearl, shimmering with colors he'd never seen on Earth. The seed seemed to pulse with a soft glow, almost alive. "These seeds are special," she said, her voice like a melody he could barely hear. "They come from my home, a place far beyond the stars." Her gaze drifted skyward, as if she could see beyond the clouds and into a world that existed only in her mind. "Each one has a story to tell, and each one will bloom into something unexpected." Harlan stared at the seed in awe. Are you from another world?" He hadn't meant to blurt it out, but the words tumbled forth before he could stop them. The woman laughed softly, a sound like chimes in the wind. "Yes, you could say that," she replied, her voice filled with both humor and a touch of sadness. "I come from a place very much like yours, but it exists far away, across the universe. My people, we have rules about crossing into other worlds." "Rules?" Harlan repeated, puzzled. She nodded, her smile fading slightly. "I am not supposed to be here, not for long. And certainly not supposed to be talking to a human." Harlan's heart sank, though he wasn't entirely sure why. "Then, why are you here? Why now?" Her eyes, so deep and so alien, softened. "I came to leave something behind, a gift you could say. The seeds. They will grow here, and in time, they will blossom into something this world has never seen." He took a step closer, his heart pounding. "Why would you risk breaking your rules to plant them here?" She hesitated, her gaze steady, yet somehow far away. "Because sometimes, to grow something beautiful, you have to take risks." Harlan felt a strange warmth in his chest, the thrill of witnessing something mysterious yet beautiful. He glanced down at the seeds shimmering in her open palm. "What will they become?" he asked softly. The woman tilted her head, gazing down at the seeds with a gentle smile. "They will grow into flowers that shine in the dark," she said, her voice laced with a wistful joy. "Each one will bloom with a light from my world, faint, but steady. They'll thrive in your soil and brighten the mountain for years, even in the dead of night." Harlan's mind raced with questions, yet he could feel something unspoken in her tone, a quiet urgency. "And when will they bloom?" he asked. "Not immediately," she said, almost regretfully. "But perhaps sooner than you think. Just give them time." She knelt down again, pressing a seed into the earth as though it were a sacred ritual. Her movements were tender, as if she were saying goodbye to a dear friend. The twilight was deepening, and the first stars were emerging, dusting the sky with silver. Harlan watched as she placed the last seed into the ground, her hands lingering in the soil. Finally, she rose, brushing her hands together, and looked up at him, her eyes gleaming in the dim light. "I have to go soon," she said, and there was a touch of sorrow in her voice. "I shouldn't have stayed this long. If I'm caught here, it would mean trouble." Harlan's heart sank. He had only just met her, and already she was slipping away. "Will I see you again?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. She took a step closer, the silver fabric of her dress fluttering in the evening breeze. "If the seeds bloom, you'll know I'm still watching over them," she said, her eyes meeting his with a deep, almost ancient sadness. "And perhaps, if the stars align, I'll return." Without thinking, Harlan reached out and took her hand, surprised at the warmth of her touch. "Then I'll wait," he said, surprising himself with his own courage. "For as long as it takes." Her fingers tightened around his, a silent promise shared in the moonlight. And just as quickly she let go, stepping back into the shadows. "I hope you keep your word, Harlan of Stone's Edge," she whispered, and with a soft shimmer, her form began to dissolve into the starlit night. Harlan stayed in the meadow long after she vanished, standing among the newly planted seeds and gazing up at the stars. The world around him felt suddenly larger and lonelier, touched by a strange magic he couldn't explain. He didn't know her name, where she'd gone, or if she would truly return, but one thing was certain: he would be waiting. Over the next few days, Harlan returned to the meadow as often as he could, checking the seeds and searching for any trace of the woman. He brought water for the soil, carefully tended the ground around the tiny seedlings, and kept a watchful eye on them as though they were treasures. Weeks passed, and the seasons changed. The snows came, then melted into the green of spring. Each time he visited, he found nothing more than a few sprouts, no sign of the ethereal blooms she had promised. Some villagers noticed his routine, raising their eyebrows as he left for the meadow each morning. But Harlan didn't care. He was keeping his promise, no matter how strange it might have seemed. One night, unable to sleep, he decided to visit the meadow by moonlight, the woman's words echoing in his mind. "They will bloom with a light from my world." The meadow was quiet as he stepped through the grass, his lantern casting a faint glow across the ground. But as he neared the spot where she'd planted the seeds, his breath caught. There, in the moonlight, were dozens of small, luminous flowers, their petals glowing with a soft, silvery light. They looked like stars, each bloom flickering with an otherworldly radiance. Harlan knelt beside them, overwhelmed by their beauty, reaching out to touch a petal. It was cool and smooth, like the night sky itself. The flowers whispered something to him, a distant, comforting hum that filled him with a quiet joy. They were her promise made real. But as he gazed at the blossoms, a shadow passed over him, a flicker in the corner of his vision. Harlan spun around, his heart pounding. There, at the edge of the meadow, he saw a faint, familiar shimmer, a figure cloaked in silver, watching him from a distance. Harlan's heart pounded as he squinted through the darkness, his eyes locking onto the figure at the meadow's edge. For a moment he thought it was her, the woman with the platinum hair and blue eyes, returned at last. But this figure was darker, its silhouette more shadow than light. He stood up slowly, every sense alert. "Who's there?" he called, his voice steady but cautious. The figure didn't respond. It only moved closer, gliding across the ground with a silent, graceful step. As it neared, Harlan could make out more details, a tall, slender figure cloaked in a robe as dark as midnight, with a faint, eerie glow outlining its edges. The figure stopped a few paces away, and in the dim moonlight, he could just make out its face, a strikingly beautiful face, angular and stern, with deep blue eyes that felt as cold and endless as the night sky. This being wasn't human, yet something in its gaze was unsettlingly familiar. "What are you doing here, human?" it asked, its voice low and almost musical, like the hum of a distant storm. The figure's eyes fell on the glowing flowers, and its expression darkened. "These blooms, they are forbidden." Harlan swallowed, gathering his courage. "She planted them," he said, nodding toward the flowers. "She told me they would bloom here, and I promised to look after them." The figure's gaze softened slightly, yet its expression remained distant. "She did something that defies the laws of our world," it said. "Our people cannot leave gifts, cannot plant anything of ours in the soil of other worlds. It disrupts the balance." "Balance?" Harlan asked, frowning. "How can flowers harm the balance?" The figure glanced back toward the stars, a strange sorrow in its gaze. You see only their beauty, but they hold a part of her world's essence. To leave such things in your world, it could lead to consequences we cannot foresee. Harlan's pulse quickened. Then where is she? He demanded, stepping closer. Is she all right? The figure's expression softened almost imperceptibly. She is safe, though she has broken our laws. For that, she cannot return to you, not easily. Harlan felt a pang of sadness. She risked everything to give us this gift. Doesn't that mean anything to you? The figure studied him, a flicker of something almost like pity crossing its face. Perhaps it does, human. But understand, she and I are bound by laws as ancient as the stars. She may not return, but her gift will remain, as long as you tend to it. With that, the figure took a step back, the shadows thickening around it. Harlan opened his mouth to ask another question, but the figure dissolved into the night, leaving him alone with the glow of the otherworldly flowers. Harlan stood alone under the moonlight, feeling both awed and troubled. The flowers glowed softly around him, casting a silvery light that bathed the meadow in an otherworldly glow. He knelt down, gently brushing his fingers over the petals, trying to make sense of the encounter. Who was that dark figure, and what exactly had the woman risked to plant these blooms? As he traced his hand over one of the blossoms, a shiver ran through him, a sensation not unlike the feeling he'd had when he'd first met her, a mixture of wonder and warmth. The flowers were her connection to him, and to this world. No matter the risks she had taken, she had left a part of herself here. He spent the rest of the night in the meadow, keeping watch over the blossoms and thinking about the woman from another world. By dawn, he had made a decision. If these flowers were forbidden, if their very existence put her at risk, then he would protect them, and her memory, with everything he had. Harlan returned to the meadow each day, keeping the flowers hidden from curious villagers and ensuring they were undisturbed. He planted other flowers around them, disguising the alien blooms among ordinary wildflowers. Only under the cover of night did he allow himself to look upon them fully, to sit among the silver-lit petals and dream of her. Seasons passed, and the flowers thrived in secret. They became a silent promise that he would keep, no matter how much time went by. One night, as he sat among the flowers in his usual vigil, he heard a faint sound, a voice on the wind, soft and familiar. At first, he thought he was imagining it, but as he leaned in, he recognized her voice, faint but unmistakable. "Harlan, thank you." He looked around, heart pounding. "Are you here?" he whispered, barely daring to hope. A shimmer appeared among the flowers, a flicker of light taking shape. For a moment, he thought he could see her, a faint, ghostly figure surrounded by starlight. She smiled, though her form wavered, as if she were barely holding on to the connection. "I can only appear for a moment," she said, her voice carrying a strange sadness. "But I wanted you to know. I haven't forgotten you." Harlan's chest tightened. "Is there no way for you to come back?" She shook her head slowly, her image flickering like a candle about to go out. "Our worlds are too far apart. But every time you tend to these flowers, I can feel it. That's how I'm here now. You've kept your promise, Harlan." He reached out, his hand passing through her ethereal form. "And I'll keep it until you return." A single tear shimmered on her cheek, and she began to fade, her figure melting back into the starlit night. "Goodbye, Harlan, and thank you." As she vanished, a soft breeze swept through the meadow, and the flowers glowed brighter, as if her spirit had infused them with a final burst of life. Harlan knelt among them, feeling her presence linger in the cool night air. Harlan continued his silent vigil, visiting the meadow each night and tending to the flowers with a dedication that puzzled the villagers of Stone's Edge. Whispers began to spread. People noticed him slipping away after dark, disappearing toward the mountain slopes. Some even claimed they saw a faint, ghostly glow in the distance, shining from the meadow. "Maybe he's found a hidden treasure up there," old Mrs. Trude suggested one morning in the village square, her voice low and conspiratorial. "Or worse, maybe he's dabbling in some kind of witchcraft." The rumors grew, transforming Harlan's secret into a story that the villagers began sharing with an almost festive fervor. Tales of glowing flowers, strange voices on the mountain, and ghostly visitors spread, drawing the attention of even the more skeptical townsfolk. Harlan, however, paid them no mind, his heart and mind fixed only on keeping his promise to the woman from the stars. One evening, as Harlan made his way to the meadow, he noticed two villagers following him from a distance. He tensed, quickening his pace, his thoughts racing. The meadow, and her flowers, were supposed to be hidden, safe from prying eyes. But with each step, the faint glow of the blossoms grew brighter, and the two villagers closed in, whispering and gesturing. When he reached the meadow, the sight before him took his breath away. The flowers were glowing with an intensity he'd never seen, lighting up the field in a dazzling display of silver and starlight. The air was alive with energy, a soft hum filling the night as if the blossoms were singing to him, calling him forward. The two villagers gasped, stumbling backward at the sight. "What in the world?" one of them stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "It's true! The mountain's cursed! Leave!" Harlan commanded, his voice stronger than he'd expected. "This is a sacred place. It's not for you." The villagers hesitated, fear and curiosity warring on their faces, but the brilliance of the flowers seemed to unnerve them. Muttering to each other, they finally turned and fled, their footsteps echoing down the mountain path. Alone once more, Harlan knelt among the flowers, marveling at their beauty and wondering if this sudden glow meant something more. He felt as if the woman were watching, her presence closer than ever, her spirit reaching across the stars. He closed his eyes, speaking softly to the air. "I won't let anyone harm them. Not as long as I'm here." As he spoke, a single blossom in the center of the meadow began to pulse with a vibrant light, its glow more intense than the others. Harlan opened his eyes, staring in wonder as a strange, delicate pattern began to emerge on its petals, a shape he recognized but couldn't quite place, like a distant memory rising to the surface. It was a symbol, he realized, a mark from her world left as a message for him alone. The symbol on the flower's petal glowed with a steady light, capturing Harlan's full attention. It was an intricate pattern, like a constellation or a distant galaxy twisted into a delicate, swirling shape. He felt as if he'd seen it before, though he couldn't remember where. Tentatively, he reached out, his fingers hovering just above the glowing petal. The flower pulsed in response, and as he touched it, a warm, tingling sensation spread through his hand and up his arm, filling him with a sense of calm and clarity. In that moment, memories that weren't his own began to surface. He could see vast stretches of deep space, stars arranged in unfamiliar constellations, planets with shimmering blue skies and landscapes of silver sand. He caught glimpses of life in her world, people cloaked in starlit fabrics, structures that rose like sculptures, and fields of flowers that glowed in the dark, just like these. And then he saw her. She was standing on a cliff beneath 3 moons, looking up at the stars with an expression of longing, as though she were searching for something far beyond her reach. It was a scene both beautiful and heartbreaking. Just as quickly, the vision faded, and he was back in the meadow, the soft glow of the flowers surrounding him. His heart ached with a new understanding. She hadn't simply been planting flowers, she'd been planting a piece of her world, a part of herself. She had risked everything to leave this memory behind, a memory she could no longer visit but could only watch from afar. Harlan ran a hand through his hair, feeling a strange mix of wonder and sorrow. How could he protect something so precious, especially now that people were curious, suspicious even? And yet, he knew he couldn't stop. He would guard these flowers, her memory, with his life if he had to. That night, he sat among the blossoms until dawn, gazing at the stars, feeling as if she were somewhere among them, watching over the meadow and him in her own quiet way. But as the first light of morning broke over the mountain, Harlan spotted another figure at the edge of the meadow, a familiar silhouette cloaked in darkness. It was the shadowy figure who had warned him about the flowers before, watching him silently from the edge of the trees. Harlan rose slowly, his heart pounding as he met the gaze of the shadowy figure. It had returned, this time watching him with a sharper intensity, a faint gleam in its cold blue eyes. He took a cautious step forward, feeling a mixture of defiance and unease. "What do you want?" he asked, keeping his voice steady. The figure's cloak rippled as if stirred by an invisible wind. "You've gone too far, human," it said, its voice laced with a subtle menace. "You've interfered with what was meant to remain unseen." Harlan clenched his fists. "She left this here for me," he replied, gesturing to the glowing flowers. "She trusted me to protect them, and I'm going to keep that promise." The figure's eyes narrowed, glinting with a strange light. Her actions were reckless. She risked everything for this sentimentality. Our world's laws are not merely rules, they are protections, boundaries that keep our realities from clashing. Harlan took a steadying breath, refusing to be intimidated. "But why?" he demanded. "What harm can a few flowers do?" The figure tilted its head, studying him for a long moment. "These flowers are more than they seem. They contain the essence of her world, a power beyond your understanding. If they continue to grow here, they could change things, bend the very nature of your world, drawing attention from forces neither of us can control." Harlan glanced down at the blossoms, their soft glow almost comforting against the figure's ominous words. "But she wanted them here," he insisted, his voice laced with desperation. "She wanted to leave something behind, something beautiful. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" The figure's gaze softened, if only slightly. "It is not that I lack understanding," it replied, its voice almost wistful. "But there is a price for breaking the rules, one she was prepared to pay. She cannot return here as long as these flowers exist. You may think you are keeping a promise, but it comes at a cost." Harlan felt a pang of sorrow and frustration. "So, you're saying I should destroy them?" The figure hesitated, then took a step forward, its tone softening. "The decision is yours. But know that if you continue to protect them, she will remain forever bound to her world, unable to break free from the laws she defied." Harlan's throat tightened. He glanced at the flowers, their gentle glow a reminder of her presence, her sacrifice. The thought of erasing them, of letting her go forever, was unbearable. But could he truly keep her bound to him, knowing what it cost her? The figure's gaze lingered on him, its expression unreadable. "Choose wisely, human. There are consequences to holding on to what was never meant to stay." With that, the figure stepped back, its form melting into the shadows, leaving Harlan alone in the meadow with a choice as heavy as the mountains themselves. Harlan stood in the fading light of the early morning, feeling the weight of the figure's words settle heavily on his shoulders. The glowing flowers surrounded him, casting silvery patterns on the ground, yet they now felt more like a burden than a blessing. He knelt down, his hands brushing against the soft petals, their coolness grounding him amidst the turmoil swirling in his mind. "What do I do?" he whispered to the flowers, as if they could offer guidance. The blooms remained silent, their light steady and unwavering. Each glow seemed to pulse with a life of its own, a reminder of her spirit, her beauty, and the dreams she had woven into their very being. But with every flicker of their light came the shadow of the warning, the risk they posed not just to him, but to her. He could almost hear her laughter, feel her warmth, and the promise of their shared moments as he had tended to the flowers. Yet the thought of her being trapped, bound by the laws of her world, gnawed at him. Suddenly, a determination flickered within him. "I will not let her sacrifice be in vain," he declared, his voice steadying. "I'll find a way to free her, to make sure she can come back." Harlan spent the rest of the day in a flurry of activity, gathering materials from the village. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but he felt a pull toward the tools of the earth, stones, herbs, anything that could help him connect to the deeper magic of the flowers. He even sought out the wisdom of old Agnes, the village herbalist, known for her tales of the old ways. "Agnes," he began, eyes bright with determination, "do you know of any way to summon someone from far away? To bridge the distance between worlds?" Agnes peered at him through her spectacles, concern etched on her wrinkled face. "Child, such things are dangerous. There are forces at play that should not be trifled with." "I understand," he replied earnestly. "But I must try. I've made a promise, and I cannot let her stay trapped because of my fears." Agnes studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Very well. If you are determined, we shall try. But be prepared, what you seek may not come without its own consequences." That evening, Harlan returned to the meadow, the air thick with anticipation. Underneath the stars, with Agnes's words swirling in his mind, he began to arrange the stones in a circle, placing the herbs he'd gathered at the center, and forming a small altar beneath the brightest of the glowing flowers. As he worked, the air began to hum around him, a low vibration that made the hair on his arms stand on end. He closed his eyes, focusing on the light from the flowers and the warmth of the memories they held. "If you can hear me," he called into the night, "I'm asking for your return. Please come back." The wind picked up, swirling around him, carrying whispers that felt like echoes of her laughter. The flowers began to glow brighter, their light pulsing in rhythm with his heartbeat, and for a moment, Harlan believed he could feel her spirit drawing near. "Please!" he shouted again, desperation creeping into his voice. "I need you here!" As Harlan's voice echoed into the night, the winds intensified, swirling around him like a tempest, each gust carrying a whisper of her name. The flowers pulsed with a brilliant light, illuminating the meadow as if the very stars were descending to listen to his plea. Harlan felt a strange, electrifying connection to the universe, as though the fabric of reality was shifting around him. The ground beneath him began to tremble slightly, and he could hear the distant sound of chimes, soft and ethereal, like laughter carried on the wind. His heart raced, and he steadied himself, focusing on the altar he'd created, willing his intention into the night. "Let her hear me! Let her come back!" he called, his voice echoing in the stillness, his words weaving through the air. The flowers glowed brighter in response, illuminating the entire meadow in a dazzling display. Suddenly, the air thickened, shimmering like heat rising off a summer road. Harlan shielded his eyes from the light, the intensity blinding him for a moment. Then, as the glow settled, he saw her, a figure materializing within the brilliant light, shimmering like a mirage. She stood before him, ethereal and radiant, her platinum hair cascading around her shoulders, eyes sparkling like sapphires. "Harlan," she breathed, her voice a melody he had longed to hear. "You've called me back." He stepped forward, heart racing. "I thought I lost you forever." His voice cracked with emotion. "I didn't know if I could bring you back, but I had to try." She smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. "You risked so much? I can feel the tension between our worlds. It's dangerous for me to be here. But I can't let you go again," he insisted, taking her hands in his. They felt cool to the touch, like moonlight woven into flesh. "You left a part of yourself here, and I want you to stay." Her gaze deepened, filled with an understanding that transcended their connection. "My staying here could unravel the balance between our worlds. If I remain too long, it may draw more than just my people's scrutiny. It could attract those who would see our worlds collide. Then we'll find a way," Harlan said, determination burning in his chest. "We'll make it work. I won't lose you again, not after everything you've done for me." The wind began to swirl again, a haunting melody echoing through the trees, and Harlan felt the temperature drop slightly. The flowers around them flickered, as if sensing the disturbance. "Listen to me," she said urgently, her grip tightening on his hands. "If I stay too long, I won't be able to return to my world at all. You must let me go." Tears filled Harlan's eyes. "But I can't live without you. You're everything to me. Love can cross the stars," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But it's the choice of both our worlds that will keep us safe. You must protect these flowers and hold them dear, but I cannot remain." The glow from the flowers intensified, and Harlan felt a pulse of energy surge through him, an overwhelming sense of connection that bound their fates together. He could feel her essence weaving through him, the warmth of their shared memories and promises. "I promise to keep them safe," he vowed, voice resolute. "And I will always remember you, no matter the distance." As the winds howled, the shimmer around her began to fade, the flowers dimming in response. "Then this is not goodbye," she said, her voice a gentle caress. "Our hearts will always be connected. When the flowers bloom again, think of me, and I will be with you." And with that, she shimmered, her figure dissolving into the brilliant light of the flowers. Harlan felt a bittersweet ache in his heart as the glow softened, leaving behind the gentle whisper of her laughter dancing in the air. The meadow was still, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the breeze, yet Harlan felt an emptiness settle in his chest. The connection they had shared lingered like a dream slipping away at dawn, and he knelt among the flowers, their glow now muted but still pulsing with a soft luminescence. It was a quiet reminder of the beauty that had graced his life, even if only for a fleeting moment. Harlan's heart was heavy, filled with a bittersweet longing. He traced his fingers over the petals, feeling the faint warmth that remained. "I'll keep my promise," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I'll protect you, and I'll wait for her." Days turned into weeks as Harlan tended to the flowers with renewed dedication. He spent every evening in the meadow, nurturing them and hiding them from the villagers, who were growing more curious with each passing day. The legend of the glowing flowers had transformed into tales of a phantom girl, a specter that haunted the mountains, captivating imaginations but fueling suspicion. One evening, as Harlan was pruning the flowers, he heard footsteps approaching. His heart raced, and he turned to see two familiar figures, Jenna and Enoch, friends from the village who had always shared a sense of adventure. "Harlan!" Jenna called, waving as she approached, a mix of excitement and curiosity on her face. "We've been hearing stories about you and your secretive mountain trips. Are you finally going to show us what's up there?" Harlan's heart sank, realizing he had been careless in his secrecy. It's nothing, really," he stammered, glancing nervously at the glowing flowers behind him. Enoch, ever the skeptic, raised an eyebrow. "Nothing? Come on! Everyone says there are glowing flowers up here, and we want to see them." Harlan hesitated, glancing back at the flowers, their petals shimmering softly under the twilight sky. He felt the weight of his promise to the woman from the stars. I can't," he said finally, trying to sound convincing. "They're not what you think." "Come on, Harlan!" Jenna pleaded, stepping closer. "We're your friends. We just want to see. What's the harm in showing us?" Harlan felt torn between the desire to share the wonder he had discovered and the fear of exposing the precious blooms to their scrutiny. "You wouldn't understand," he said, desperation creeping into his voice. "These flowers are special. They're not just flowers. But that's what makes it so intriguing," Enoch insisted. "What do you mean? Special how?" Before Harlan could respond, A gust of wind swept through the meadow, rattling the branches overhead and causing the flowers to shimmer brightly as if in response to the tension. Jenna and Enoch exchanged bewildered glances. "Whoa! What was that?" Jenna exclaimed, her eyes wide with wonder. Harlan turned back to the flowers, panic rising. He needed to act quickly to protect them. "You have to go," he urged, trying to sound authoritative. "It's not safe here." But the moment he said it, the wind shifted again, and a low rumble reverberated through the air, sending a shiver down Harlan's spine. He glanced around, feeling an unusual energy rising in the atmosphere. The flowers pulsed with intensity, and the glow became almost blinding. "What's happening?" Enoch asked, fear creeping into his voice. Harlan felt an overwhelming sense of urgency. "You need to leave. Now!" He pushed past them, ready to shield the flowers, to hide the secret he had vowed to protect. But it was too late. As if in response to his fear, the ground beneath them trembled, and a brilliant flash of light erupted from the center of the flower patch. Harlan shielded his eyes, feeling a surge of energy swirl around him. Jenna and Enoch cried out, stepping back in shock. The air shimmered, and then, there she was again, emerging from the light, the beautiful woman with platinum hair and sapphire eyes. But this time, the energy surrounding her was different. It was darker, more chaotic, and Harlan could feel the tension in the air, a sign that something had changed. "What have you done?" she exclaimed, her voice filled with a mixture of relief and alarm as she caught sight of Harlan and the startled villagers. "Harlan!" Jenna gasped, recognizing the figure behind the brilliance. "Who is she?" The woman's gaze flickered to Jenna and Enoch, her expression tightening. "You shouldn't be here," she warned, her voice urgent. "You've drawn attention, and it could mean danger for all of you." Harlan's heart raced as he looked from the woman to his friends, who were still trying to comprehend the sight before them. Jenna's eyes sparkled with a mix of wonder and fear, while Enoch stood rooted in place, his mouth agape. "Who are you?" Jenna finally managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is dangerous," the woman said urgently, her gaze locking onto Harlan's. "You've brought them here, and they could be at risk. I can't stay if this continues." "Wait, please," Harlan pleaded, stepping closer to her, desperate to bridge the widening gap between them. "I can explain. I've been trying to protect the flowers to protect you. But they have questions. You can't trust them," she warned, her voice a low hiss, though Harlan could see her eyes softening as she looked at him. "You don't understand the forces at play here. If they know about me, about us, it could bring more than just curious villagers. It could attract those who would exploit your world for their own gain." "What do you mean?" Harlan asked, frustration building. "What could possibly happen? I thought you wanted to be here." "I do, but I can't remain if my presence risks everything," she replied, urgency lacing her words. "I came back because you called me, but now I have to go." Enoch finally found his voice. "This is insane. You're saying she's from another world? That's not possible." But Jenna, caught in the wonder of the moment, stepped closer, curiosity overcoming her fear. "Harlan, is this true? Did you really bring her back?" "Yes," he admitted, feeling the weight of his choices. "She's real, and she needs our help. If you want to understand, you need to listen." The woman's gaze flickered to Jenna, then to Enoch, as if gauging the risk. "You don't know what you're dealing with. This is not just about flowers. This is about the very balance of our worlds. There are beings who would take advantage of this connection. But we can help," Harlan insisted, his heart pounding. "We can protect you and the flowers together." "Your world is fragile," she said, shaking her head. "I cannot allow anyone else to be put in danger. I can only hope to keep the flowers safe, but if they find out about me, it could be disastrous." Jenna stepped forward, her expression earnest. "If you're in danger, we'll stand with you. We can help protect the flowers, Harlan. You're not alone anymore." The woman looked at Jenna with disbelief. "You don't understand what you're asking. The more people who know, the greater the risk." "I know it sounds crazy," Enoch said, stepping up beside Jenna. "But we've seen what this means to Harlan. He's been protecting these flowers for you, and if there's a chance we can help, we have to try." Harlan turned to the woman, hope flickering within him. "We're stronger together. You can't give up on this connection we've built." The woman's gaze softened again, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "If I stay longer, it could unravel everything, but maybe we can find a way to safeguard this." As the energy in the meadow shifted, Harlan felt the flowers pulse around them, their glow responding to the rising tension. He reached for her hand, intertwining their fingers, feeling a surge of warmth that echoed the bond they had forged. "Together," he said firmly, locking eyes with her. "Let's make a plan." She inhaled sharply, her expression shifting as if weighing the possibility. "All right, but you must promise, if we do this, you will protect the flowers at all costs. If we're discovered, you must be ready to act." "We will," Harlan assured her, glancing at his friends, who nodded in agreement. "Whatever it takes." In the days that followed, Harlan, Jenna, and Enoch worked tirelessly alongside the woman, whom Harlan had learned was named Lyra. They devised a plan to safeguard the meadow, weaving a protective barrier of energy around the flowers using the ancient knowledge Agnes had shared and the magic that flowed through the petals. Under the moonlit sky, they gathered each night to strengthen the bond between their worlds. Lyra shared stories of her galaxy, of vibrant landscapes and celestial wonders, of the beauty that existed beyond the stars. In return, Harlan revealed the simple joys of his village, the warmth of community, and the tranquility of life on the mountain. As they worked together, the lines between their worlds began to blur. Harlan and Lyra's connection deepened, their hearts entwined with the blossoms they tended. Yet the tension lingered in the air, a reminder of the precarious balance they maintained. One evening, as they sat amidst the glowing flowers, Lyra turned to Harlan with a serious expression. "There are those who will seek to disrupt this balance, to take what they cannot have. If they come, you must be ready to protect not just the flowers, but your home and your friends." "I will," Harlan vowed, his voice steady. "Whatever it takes to keep you safe and the flowers alive." Jenna and Enoch, now firmly part of the secret, felt the weight of their task. They trained under Lyra's guidance, learning to harness the energy that flowed from the flowers, discovering how to protect their hidden treasure. But as the days turned into weeks, rumors began to spread beyond Stone's Edge. Whispers of strange occurrences, mysterious lights on the mountain, and a spectral girl in the meadow reached the ears of those who lived beyond the village. Soon, curious outsiders began to appear, drawn by the tales and seeking the truth behind the legends. One twilight evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in a golden glow, a group of strangers approached the meadow, their intentions unclear. Harlan, Lyra, Jenna, and Enoch stood at the edge of the flowers, hearts pounding, ready to defend what they had fought so hard to protect. Harlan turned to Lyra, his resolve strengthening. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Lyra nodded, her eyes shimmering with determination. "Together." As the strangers drew closer, curiosity and apprehension filled the air. The fate of their worlds hung in the balance, but amidst the uncertainty, Harlan felt a flicker of hope. Their connection was powerful, and together, they could forge a new beginning, one that would weave the magic of both worlds into something beautiful and enduring. With the first glow of stars appearing overhead, Harlan and his friends stood united, ready to embrace the unknown, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, bound by the light of the flowers and the promise of a future yet to unfold.